Traditionally, we're only a week or two away from WrestleMania at this point. Two WrestleManias in history have already taken place by now. WrestleMania 20 and WrestleMania 18 all took place prior to the middle of March. March 14th and March 17th. But this year, a little bit longer of a wait. And I don't know if you've been following along, but WWE, while we wait to get to WrestleMania, has been just cramming that weekend as full as possible. We talked about the Hall of Fame last week, how that's been added. NXT is now going to be at that Fontainebleau place as well. The Undertaker show has been added to after night 1 of WrestleMania. And if after night 2 of WrestleMania, if again you're running out of things to do, there is now the roast of WrestleMania, starring Tony Hinchcliffe and WWE people. I'm very curious to see how that goes. A lot of people are not big fans of that. Tony Hinchcliffe, little controversial when his comments around the I think it was around the election time. He said something about Puerto Rico. Not a lot of people were fans of. And with WWE being owned by TKO, you wonder exactly like how excited they are to have, something like this. I mean, we're going to bring up Chris Benoit and Vince McMahon and things like that. I mean, that's what you do in a roast. So you do wonder, but either way, if that's your WrestleMania night 2 after show as well. So a very crammed weekend as they keep adding more things to it, just to literally squeeze every last dollar out of you and to take 100% of your time while you're in Las Vegas. Yeah. But as we're on the road to WrestleMania, WWE's in Europe for the foreseeable future, for the rest of the month, right? They've already done 2 shows, one in Spain, and they just finished up one in Brussels.
And I was correct. Corey Graves is filling in for Pat McAfee while they're in Europe.
You were correct. And so hopefully Corey Graves learns to not put the cart before the horse too quick, because you never know how quick it will be before you're back on the main roster. It was like a big, FU essentially like a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago, but you play it out. And I'm not saying he's on there full time.
You know what this means though? Like Corey Graves to me is like, you're a baseball guy, I'm a baseball guy. He's a good utility player.
Yeah, and I think, you know what, again, it just shows Corey Graves should learn from this that, if a year or two goes by and you're in NXT, I get maybe some frustration, but, these knee-jerk reactions or something, because then you find out, boom, you are right back in it before you even know it. I just saw something recently
take Byron Saxton, for example. I mean, Byron's been all over the place, and, they've put him in positions that maybe he doesn't like, but guess what? He's a company man, and he's been there a long time now, so...
I just saw something where Daniel Stern originally turned down Home Alone, right? And then luckily got a second opportunity at it. And now we know, obviously, the rest is history. He's famous for those roles. But, just like, let's say, sometimes, you getting turned down. There's even been actors I've heard who have been, turned down for parts for somebody else. And then later on, they're like, you know what? On second thought, that person didn't work out. And so don't burn any bridges. That's all I'm just trying to say. And John Cena, though, might be burning some bridges, right? All jokes aside, and I guess not all jokes aside because it is still storyline-like, but John Cena this week came out in Belgium, and I have to say, and maybe we'll talk this, he had a great promo talking about why he has essentially turned heel. He is not a heel. He's not a face. He's a human. That's what he said during his promo to kick off Monday Night Raw. But I want to talk about him going heel and how interesting it is during this particular tour, because this show this past week in Brussels was the first time ever WWE's had a televised show in Brussels. I don't know how long it's been since they've been to Brussels, but I mean, John Cena, he's there a lot, and he's been there a lot. And I imagine one of the shows throughout history and time, he's probably been to Brussels. But I imagine he has probably been to Brussels under 5 times in his WWE career. Probably. And to a large swatch of that crowd, I imagine that's the first time they are seeing him live. So what do you make of the idea that John Cena, is heel, and it's one thing if he's heel in Chicago or heel in New York, we've seen him a million times, but to be going in front of a crowd in which maybe these kids are literally seeing you for the very first time and having to present you in that way, that's kind of a weird one if you ask me.
No, I think it is a little weird, but wrestling fans in general, I mean, aside from the kids are still learning the wrestling game. Like they don't know the inside baseball as well as maybe we do, so to speak. But yeah, it's definitely different because for the last 20 some odd years, John Cena's been one thing, Mr. Never Give Up, and that whole thing. So yeah, it is a little weird, but I think, and let's be honest, a lot of kids are wrestling fans because of maybe their parents. So maybe their parents are schooling them up on it and saying, hey, this is not the John Cena you've seen for, a lot of them are probably so young they don't even remember, obviously, some of the peak John Cena, but they've probably seen it on, on the networks and whatnot. And their parents are probably like, so you're going to see a John Cena that, it's not going to be the John Cena you're used to. This is a different John Cena. And, you just kind of have to, take it with a grain of salt. I will say, though, to your point, it was a great promo. I thought heel John Cena off to a really good start. I liked it. For a second, I thought they were going to do what you suggested, which he puts the microphone up and puts the microphone down without saying anything. I thought they were going to do that. And then after a few mic drops, he cuts a promo and actually it was well done. Obviously the part with Cody coming in, I thought that was good. They're getting things ready to rock and roll for WrestleMania that we just talked about. And, it'll be here before you know it. So overall, I really like that segment.
I think, what I was talking about when it being weird is the sense of this is, it's not just John Cena turning heel, but again, this is his last year in the WWE. So this might be your first time seeing John Cena and it's your last time seeing John Cena. I kind of compare it to the fact that, let's say you like a band that's from Europe and they never come to the United States. Not your town here in the United States, not like New York or Chicago. They don't even come to the United States, meaning that you drove to Washington, D.C. from Syracuse because that's as close as they're ever going to get, right? So they come to your country maybe for the first time in your whole life as you've seen them from afar a million times. And the first time they come into your country, they're like, we're going to play not the hits. We're going to play an acoustic set with some of our B-sides. And you're like, no, that's great if I lived in Glasgow and I've seen you 25 times. But this is the one and only time ever. This is your farewell tour. You're never going to be a band again. And as the tour goes on, you're never coming back here. This is your one and only trip, right? So it is unique, the fact that this is their only time to ever see John Cena, some of these people, and they only get to see him like that in person. It makes it difficult. I guess not just difficult, but it's also interesting because, again, he is a heel, but he's still selling the merch as a face, if you know what I mean. He's still selling that the last time is now, you know what I mean? In Brussels, the last time is now, in Spain and Toronto and all these other things. So you're getting his farewell merchandise and saluting him, but then also he's a bad guy as of late, and now you're booing him, which is interesting.
The crowd was hot for him too. The crowd was it was very loud. It was that segment was a lot of fun. I mean, Brussels brought their A game this past week on Raw, so I got to give them a shout out there.
You feel a little bad because I saw it in Barcelona and I saw it in Brussels this week, more so than you see in the United States, is when they talk about stuff in the future. And I know when you go to a show anytime and they hype up stuff in the future, you really want it to be there because you're there and it's your crowd, you know what I mean? So you want that match to be in front of you. But I noticed there was a lot of booing, whether it was on SmackDown or it was on Raw, when they were mentioning, for example, I think Paul Heyman was on SmackDown and talked about how Roman Reigns returns next week on SmackDown. And there was a lot of booing, and not because they don't like Roman Reigns, but because they're like, we want him to be here because this is our this is your show. You come here, you know what I mean? Like I said, your favorite band comes to the United States, and then they're like, the lead singer couldn't make it, guys. You're like, oh, really? That kind of thing. So, and I saw that this week Seth Rollins did the promo on Monday Night Raw, and he was talking about how he's going to SmackDown to confront Roman Reigns and them because they're not here tonight, and there was a lot of booing. And I remember saying, I wish they were here too. And it's different there because that's this is your WrestleMania. Every one of these Raws and SmackDowns is their biggest show they've ever been to.
It's a good way for Seth to put more heat on Roman and put himself over a little bit more, so that's not a bad thing.
That's true, yeah, that Roman isn't making all the towns. I will say
Glass done that before. That's been a shtick for a long time.
I will say, when it comes to Glasgow and London and some of these, I imagine it won't be as bad because they do make return trips to these cities. As we did see, actually, they're going to be making a return trip to Europe before Clash in Paris this upcoming summer with some Raws and SmackDowns from Ireland and the UK again. But a Brussels and a Spain, I can tell you what, I've never remembered watching a WWE show from either Italy or from Spain. I've seen it from London and Germany and stuff like that, very rare, but Barcelona, Spain, the first time that I can remember in my lifetime that, WWE, and I think they had some Coliseum videos back before I was born, but actually a Monday Night Raw. I think they said it was the first ever Raw or SmackDown ever from Spain in general. So it's just crazy to be in these places that, they've never been. I'm very curious, maybe you can tell me a little about this with John Cena, right? He's a bad guy now. How long do we expect the heel run to go?
Ooh, that's the $1 million question that a lot of us are thinking
Just
right
a
now.
WrestleMania?
Honestly, I think and I'm going to borrow this from Eric Bischoff because he kind of alluded to it on his podcast 83 Weeks recently. I feel like it's going to be in thirds. Like it's like there's going to be like I feel like the last third will be like his redemption kind of a thing. Like what we're like the first two thirds. So I would say by the fall, going into the end of the year is when I think he turns face. I got to give Eric Bischoff some credit on that one because I never thought of it like that, kind of like in thirds, where like, he was face for a hot second in that first third. Now we're getting to the point where he's like serious heel for like the second third. And then when we get to that fall-ish, time of year, that final third, I think he finishes his run as a face.
I'm very curious how he's going to organically. We know The Rock does things not organically. He just kind of just does them. Like, I'm here now and I'm in this match. And kind of confusing in some aspects. But I'm very curious how he is going to be organically a face again.
That's the thing. It's funny you mentioned The Rock because The Rock, he just like those press conferences we talked about before. Like it's we need Rock to stay in character. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean with John Cena, I think it comes full circle. I think there's going to be a point. I might be wrong, but I think there might be a point where John Cena's like, I just can't do this anymore. Like this is not really me. Like I'm. And then maybe he turns on The Rock like that. Maybe there's something there. Maybe it is WrestleMania that it's a short-term heel turn. It's tough. It just
seems like he's going all in on this thing, and really like essentially what he said in his promo was really like not just saying he's a bad guy today, but like throwing away like his whole career kind of thing. Like this was a toxic relationship all along and all this kind of stuff. So it's just going to be interesting in how he then like on the dime kind of redeems all of that. You know what I mean? Like it would be like, you're dating somebody and you literally are like, it's not just that I don't like you today, but in 2016 when I said I loved you, I was lying then. In 2012, I was lying then. Like really digging deep, you know what I mean? And then having to then be like, actually double down the other way. No, none of that's true,
Yeah, I mean that's the way they'll have to probably do it, I would feel like. I mean, I just, for me, like the more I think about it and kind of wonder how John Cena's final run ends, I really think he's going to end as a face. I feel like
absolutely he is.
I feel like it
just
has
don't know
to,
how.
right? It has to be.
Yeah, I think it has to be, right? I just don't know how. And what I actually got thinking about, and I don't know if this played any part in it, but it kind of makes me think it did, is that The Rock last year became a bad guy. And I'm not saying he's never been a bad guy before, but he became a bad guy in the modern day. Now, Rock was a bad guy earlier on in his movie career, like 2003, 2002-ish, right? When he had that third match with Stone Cold at WrestleMania 19, where he was essentially, quote unquote, gone Hollywood, right? But now that he is like, the biggest superstar, now that he is larger than life, presidential candidate to some, the largest movie star in the world, owns all these other companies, owns the XFL kind of thing, works on he is larger.
On the board,
He's not an up and coming movie star anymore. Right. He's not a WWE, like back in 2003, I think he was WWE superstar. The Rock stars in this movie. Now he doesn't include any of that. He's bigger than WWE. But yet last year we saw him, based on the storyline and based on what was going on, just become a bad guy, right? And I think John Cena, I have to think that he looked at that because John Cena is a public figure, a movie star, the voice of car companies and insurance companies and background of, the host of the Today Show on occasion, all of these major things. So I have to think that he looked at that, knowing The Rock is as big as The Rock is, and was able to be a bad guy and see how that affected him at the box office. See how that affected him in getting commercial roles. See how that affected him, when it comes to his public persona outside of wrestling and his overall likeness. And if Make-A-Wish kids still did come up to him, so I have to think John Cena, before turning heel, saw that it's still, if The Rock literally one of the most well-beloved people in the United States currently, right? One of the biggest movie stars and one of the most, like, everyone loves The Rock. I talk to people who hate wrestling, but if I see The Rock's going to be there, their eyes light up like, oh, The Rock. I love The Rock, right? So to see him be able to be a very bad guy, right? The final boss, with the cursing and the craziness that he did last year and somewhat into this year, but also not like affecting his bottom dollar at the box office. John Cena probably took some of that into account. And it's because Vince McMahon even made it clear back in the day of why he never turned heel, because again, too profitable as a face for him to ever turn heel. So you have to think John Cena might have kind of, not just in storyline, but looked to The Rock in real life to say, okay, I can be a bad guy, but still be John Cena, the lovable comedian actor in the next Jumanji movie. And it won't affect that, right? It's not going to hurt ticket sales. It's not going to hurt me outside of WWE, because that's really where he's going full time.
I mean, it makes sense because most people know it's a show. You know what I mean? It's not real. Like it's essentially a soap opera for guys. I always say that it's a soap opera for guys, but also girls, because there's a lot of ladies that love wrestling. So it's one of those things where it's a I guess the new way of saying it would probably be like live action drama.
But I have to say though, like obviously the old school way, there's a reason why some wrestlers were never the leading man in some movies, because they were bad guys. And Vince McMahon and the WWE and the WCW, they would not let their bad guys essentially go off and be on Jimmy Kimmel or Jay Leno or Conan O'Brien as bad guys if they were going to go on as good guys. The Undertaker, we know him. He's obviously the most synonymous of staying in character. He said, I couldn't go on Saturday Night Live and host Saturday Night Live or do any of these things because I'm a good guy and I have to stay in that character. And I know that even as recent as, like I said, maybe 10 years ago, Vince McMahon, pretty made it clear that, John Cena as a bad guy wasn't going to work for all the financial and all the positive things he was doing. And while kayfabe is not, it's essentially dead now, but he still thought, it just wouldn't be quote unquote best for business if John Cena is, a bad guy. It's not going to be best for the Marine. It's not going to be best for any of these other things. But obviously we have different owners now and things like that. But in general, I just think The Rock was probably a good example of you could be a bad guy. And it's now we're at a point where it's not going to necessarily, because before, while it might not have affected business, it would have been a question. It would have been a question. And maybe even people like Vince McMahon might have even said, hey, John, no. Now that you're a bad guy, you can't go do that. Vince McMahon probably, if he was dead, many people are counting down the days, for the disdain for that man. But I will say, he would be rolling in his grave, right? Or Vince McMahon Sr. specifically would be rolling in his grave seeing things that like The Rock is doing, of being a bad guy on TV and then being a face in the press conferences. Like just that alone, right? Vince McMahon, I don't think he would be a super big fan of that. Most wrestling fans are not fans of that. But, you do have to walk that line. You do have to kind of see what is capable. And I think John Cena saw that it was capable of doing this, maybe for the first time in his career, of saying, I can do this. And it's not going to essentially hurt me. But I want to kind of end this on.
Here's the thing with the whole Rock and Cena thing. I like to that point about the press conferences and stuff. I think if you're under the WWE umbrella, so to speak, like you're performing essentially, because at a press conference, I still consider that performing for WWE. I think you stay in character the entire time. Otherwise, if you're doing other stuff, that's fine. But
think about the good old show remember that show after SmackDown when they used to have Smack Talk. I used to love that show. And some matches were made via that. And that was essentially the equivalent of these press conferences, right? It was like Daniel Bryan with Renee Paquette, and then a Miz would come on there and slap up Daniel Bryan and challenge him to a match. Yep. So these press conferences are essentially similar to that. So it's hard for me to break away and not just think that this is Raw, Afterburn, or Smack Talk. You know what I mean? Because like you said, it is still on the WWE programming. And I think that it should stay the same. But I guess my last question about The Rock is, we didn't see The Rock come out as part of this John Cena thing. Do you think The Rock is going to be a major part, or do you think The Rock was just a vehicle for John Cena to be where he is now in this heel turn?
I think The Rock gets involved. I do. I think that you're going to see The Rock. I think he's going to be fairly involved. Leading up to WrestleMania and WrestleMania itself, I do think he's going to stick his nose in some way, shape, or form. And the best part about all this is, I think it's going to happen, but how is it going to happen? What's going to happen? Like, there's so many questions. It's going to be so intriguing.
John Cena didn't allude too much in the promo this week about his alliance with, The Rock and what was the rapper he was with there? The name
Travis
eludes
Scott.
me here. Yeah, so he didn't, he didn't come out in all black, right? He still came out. It's weird, right? Same music, right? Same merch, same look. Everything about John Cena, it wasn't like the Hogan where he came out the next night in black, right? John Cena came out looking like John Cena, just not acting like John Cena.
And here's the best part. He alluded to it during the promo. He alluded to it. We were having that conversation. What's going to happen? What's his look, entrance? He alluded to it. He said, I'm not changing anything, except, the way he cut it. He was like, but everything I did before, wasn't true.
He's not changing anything because there is still merch to sell, especially in his farewell tour.
Yes.
And it'll be interesting to see as time goes on as we move through March on the road to WrestleMania. Still a good 30 days away from WrestleMania in Las Vegas.